Hi, eighth graders. Um, you probably are finishing up with your Beauty and the Beast movie. And last week you read Beauty and the Beast. You're seeing the movie now and comparing differences between the modernization of the movie and the traditional story. I am sure most of you have seen the glaring difference in the character of Belle. And I think it's fantastic that they made her a strong character. She is into engineering, and I know they made that a deliberate job for her, tinkering with watches and clocks and understanding how things are done. So she's a smart young woman, independent young woman. I think most of us prefer a character like that as opposed to the traditional character. So I'm going to go through some things that we're going to look at with Cinderella. And the analysis of Cinderella is going to take us from Beauty and the Beast into an analysis of Little Red Riding Hood, which we're going to do next week. So I'm going to explain some things in the slideshow, point out some fun facts that I just think are really interesting. And I hope you enjoy this. Where you see hyperlinks, you can't access those because you are watching this in YouTube, but they're all going to be in the week breakdown. So all of the links that you see here will be accessible in the breakdown of the week. But I've added them into this to show you where they go. Okay. So 2 weeks ago, you read the traditional version of Cinderella by Charles Perrault. He was the Frenchman who collected fairy tales from all around Europe. He did not write them, he collected them. So, as we've already talked about before with the evolution of fairy tales began as oral stories told across generations and across places, and different people capitalized on that and collected them. After Perrault, the Grimm brothers then did their own interpretations. So in the very traditional one, we want to remember Cinderella as extremely passive, right? She didn't seem able to make many decisions on her own. She was sweeping ashes, trying to get away from that, trying to go to the ball. She went 3 times to the ball. Remember, our lucky number 3, with the help of her fairy godmother. And something that Perrault added to his version of Cinderella, which does not exist in any other version or pre his version. So he added these details of the fairy godmother and the slipper. And there's an interesting debate on the slipper. In the French word, he was French, the French word for glass is very similar to fur or a pelt. And many people think that he actually wrote about fur slippers, because who the heck would want to wear a glass slipper? But nobody obviously can come up to a consensus on that. But it's just interesting how something that maybe he didn't even deliberately add has become probably what most people think of most when they hear that version of the story. So just some fun, interesting little things about the story there. Then we have an essay about Cinderella, and this is a psychological analysis on different people in Cinderella, in particular women. It focuses on how it's about women. It's not at all about a young woman trying to get her prince or her man. It is about women supporting each other, women undermining each other, the really tense relationship between mothers and daughters, and how men are there to be dominated by women. That men are actually the ones who have no voice, no role, no say. And women take up 99.9% of the action and the personality. And I want you to think for a second about where you notice that in other stories too, because that's very common. The men are there, but if you were to try to think about what role they serve, they're very clueless. or just brainless most of the time. So I really enjoyed this article. This is an optional read. It's tough and it gets into a lot of analysis of behavior and kind of behind our actions, what we're not aware of what we're doing or saying, but it's a really interesting idea. And a lot of these ideas make sense to me, especially the way women support each other or don't support each other and mother-daughter relationships. So it's pretty neat. Later on with your worksheet, you're going to have to respond to some ideas from the article. Again, you do not need to read the article, but if you'd like just to learn a little bit more about analyzing characters in a particular fairy tales, please give it a shot. We have a podcast by the author Sandra Cisneros. She's written many books, including The House on Mango Street, and she credits sneaking into libraries and reading fairy tales as her inspiration to become a writer. And throughout many of her works, not just The House on Mango Street, you see evidence of fairy tales, patterns, the style she writes in. She also says that she grew up in a Spanish English speaking household and world, and she loved the way using two languages made her stories sound more like fairy tales. And she talks about how she translated Spanish to English and it gave it a very unique style. And she thought, gosh, I really like how that sounds. So it's about 5-7 minutes long. Again, optional to listen to that, but it's very interesting on language and stories. And I would definitely listen to it because you're going to write your own story. And what better to get tips from a fantastic author on how to use language? So, next, I'd like you to listen to or read. I have read the section for you and included the pages. A section from her book, The House on Mango Street, called The Family of Little Feet. And you will definitely see evidence of everything she talks about in her interview that you probably just listened to. In particular, because we're focusing on fairy tale elements, I want you to look at how men act. And I have a little spoiler alert, it's not great. How women act, the use of colors. Remember, you've already looked at last week the deliberate use of colors, purples, blues, red, black, white, what they indicate, how they symbolize different things. Look at how Cisneros uses colors. She alludes to many fairy tales, not just Cinderella, but other ones too. So I'd be interested in seeing what you come up with. Patterns and numbers. I think we're probably sick of identifying 3s and 7s everywhere. And the theme of growing up. So many fairy tales were written for young people, and they deal with that transition to adulthood. And that's a common theme in all sorts of literature, not unique to fairy tales. But I want you to think about what the author is saying about the growing up or coming of age. Is it desirable? Is it undesirable? Does it come with bumps? Is it smooth? So just think about what she's saying, what her message or her theme statement is with that. So again, you will have a link to the audio, or you may read the text in these slides, or both. Please go back as much as you need to. And then finally, I'll just leave you with 2 different optional reads. One is a link to various Cinderella tales from around the world. And I think it's always interesting to see from stories in other countries and cultures what that story reflects about people, their beliefs, their values. And so that there's some interesting ones there from around the world. And then the other is a deeper analysis of the original Cinderella. So if you want to get deep with the Charles Perrault one, the one that you read 2 weeks ago and that I talked about in the beginning, go ahead and read that. It's just neat if you enjoy diving into symbols and themes in literature. All right, so again, just to recap here, all of the links are available in the week overview slides, which you also get on Monday. And if you want to know where they go or where they fit, I've highlighted them also in this lesson. But the one item that you do need to turn in is the worksheet that is also linked in the week overview. And your teacher will probably put that in classroom as well. Thank you. I hope you enjoy all of these different, unique, and deep perspectives into a story that we probably think is just kind of superficial and silly and Disney.